collective identity imprinted on a fixed body of spiritual culture, which he was obliged to assimilate to a certain degree. Civilization assumed a rational and volitional force from the side of man, that is, in which the 17th century, after Descartes, philosophers called the subject. But the necessity of such force and the presence of such a model, abstracted and fixed in the culture, equalized itself to a certain extent with both the representatives of a core ethnos of a religion lying at the foundation of a civilization and those who ended up at the zone of influence from other ethnic contexts. To adopt the foundations of a civilization was quantitatively easier to be accepted into a tribe. I actually disagree with that. I mean, I actually think most tribes, you could be accepted into a tribe fairly easily. It's how tribes survived. The expansion and declension of kinship is how you actually survive as a tribal group. In so much as theirs was a way for no demand to organically absorb the gigantic reservoirs of unconscious archetype that perform a series of rational logical operations.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I feel like that's that last sentence.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to learn the basics of civilization than to be accepted into the tribe. On the face of it, I don't think that's true. I think when it comes to the modern conception of a nation state versus a pre-modern conception of or what he's calling a civilization, then that dichotomy then it makes sense. But in the way that we use the word tribe, I don't think this is right.
Yeah, right. If we talk about tribe versus Christendom, I think it's easier for me to join a tribe. I can do it by marriage.
Yeah.
Right. I can do it by learning their language. I can do it by adoption. I can do it by anything that would give me symbolic kinship with that tribe.
Yeah.
And tribes, I mean, it does vary from tribe to tribe, but a lot of tribes would try to extend symbolic kinship to people because that's how they survive. So they would try to figure out a way in which you could be kin. I mean, Marshall Solins wrote a whole book on this. What is kinship, which is about kinship as a foundation of tribal relations and basically the foundations of politics in a kind of pre-historical mode. His other book about the foundations of politics, he wrote with David Graeber, and that's on kings, and I'll talk about that. That's a different book. But I think this is interesting. So we talked about how weirdly a lot Dugin pulls from neoconservatives, and people don't pick this up. Like, he pulls a whole lot from Huntington. He pulls a whole lot from Huntington, like a ton from Huntington's Class of Civilizations.
Yeah, because I think it's because he formally is very against all neoconservatives, and because he doesn't acknowledge where they might have a point, any of them. It's but because he has formally eschewed them all. So if there's something that's worth picking out, you could just keep that, and just it seems to the I don't know the uninformed maybe like it's his idea,
right?
In the same way that I could go talk about this stuff and say, oh, here's a thought, but not mention that it's actually from Alexander Dugin, and most people that I know won't have read this. Haven't entertained the notion that this is worth reading, so they wouldn't catch it.
But this is interesting because there is a different concept of these civilizations. So we talked about the Huntington one. Even his list of civilizations is more or less the Huntington list of civilizations. But then we get to his use of Oswald Spengler, because one of the things I was going to say, if Evola's here, well, who is Evola? Evola is René Guénon. And the French perennialist, traditionalist, Catholic turned Sufi mystic guy. That's where a lot of Evola's spiritual thinking comes from. And then politically, Evola is Spengler more than Mussolini.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So it's not surprising that Spengler shows up in here. Oswald Spengler, in his famous book, The Decline and Rest, even contrasts civilization and culture, considering the second an expression of organic vital spirit of man, but the first a product of the cooling off of that spirit in a mechanical and purely technical boundaries. According to Spengler, civilization is a product of the cultural death, which I kind of don't remember if that's entirely true, but I think it actually is fairly good because Spengler's full of really, really strong organic metaphors.
Yeah,
However,
I've read Spengler, and I do not recall this, but it does not sound made up. It just sounds like, I just don't remember that.
Well, I'm like, is it in Man and Technics and not in Decline of the West? Even though it's said to be in Decline of the West here, but I'm trying to think, it's like, is it Man and Technics is where he talks about technical boundaries and stuff a lot more.
Yeah, it would make more sense.
Yeah. According to Spengler, civilization is a product of culture death. Contemporary Western civilization did not receive a general acknowledgement, and most often today, the term civilization and culture are used as synonyms, even though each researcher can have his own opinion on this point. Which, because they're fucking words. Like they don't like they're words, and they're words that are contested.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then we have postmodernism, and this is where I weirdly agree with Matt McManus that there was a postmodern turn in right-wing thinking, and I don't just mean in Dugin, although it's explicit in Dugin. This is part of what's going on here. This is his appeal to the rest was actually partly based off of post-structural left-wing in quotation marks postmodern thinkers.
Yeah,
which is interesting because by the time that this, like, you actually saw left-wing Duginism, everybody had moved past that except for the Deleuze and Guattari people. Like, no one's quoting Derrida and Paul Ricoeur in this way on the left, in socialist circles, the way they would in the aughts in the 90s. All right.
Yeah, like I don't think I've encountered Derrida
right
in the last, I want to say, decade or 15 years maybe.
But if you are talking about the mid-aughts, when this would have been written,
that's true, because that's people who are still very much about those things.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember, like, this didn't appear in English, I think, till 2011. But it's also a 2007, 2008 work in Russian. Like, so this is old, now. I mean, we're literally almost 2 decades out from when this was published.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would make sense that when you read like Templars of the Proletariat or Putin versus Putin, it's not an entirely different. It's very recognizable, but it's
different.
He has developed his thought since this book.
Well, here's my thing about Dugin. When we say developed, I think he's so eclectic that you might have trouble. It's like reading Nietzsche. You might actually have trouble finding a consistent Dugin other than a few spiritual and vague political alignments about Eurasianism and stuff like that. That stuff is consistent.
Yeah.
But how he justifies it or what he thinks it means, it's all over the place.
Yeah, it's this book does. I mean, not just this book. This corpus of work kind of feels like if you were like a prolific like Facebook or Twitter poster, you took your entire years of daily, hourly posts, and you flesh those out into chapters. It's like it wouldn't be very coherent,
right?
Even if because usually books are all about there's a lot more thought put into them,
right? So let's get into where this eclecticism really becomes interesting but difficult to comprehend. We talked about some of the weirder spiritual stuff in the first half of the book, but let's get to here. In postmodernity, criticism of historical optimism, universalism, and historicism acquired a systemic character and established a doctrinal premise for a total revision of the conceptual apparatus of Western European philosophy. The revision itself has not yet been carried out to its conclusion, but what has been done by Levi-Strauss, which I think it's weird to include him in this. Actually, this is something I consider graduate student bullshit, where you actually like throw a bunch of names together and say it represents something, but you don't actually say what it really represents. I mean, he kind of does, but like I don't. Levi-Strauss is a structuralist, so like he's not against universalism.
And he has got enough names. He could have just not said Levi-Strauss.
Yeah. Barthes, Ricoeur, Foucault, Deleuze, Derrida, and others. Well, it's basically the non-Marxist French left in the from mid-century to the end of the 20th century. Is already enough to convince one of the impossibility of doing a dictionary of modernity without thorough and rigorous deconstruction. Paul Ricoeur is summarizing a thesis of philosophers of suspicion. I've talked about Ricoeur before when I was in my Nailing It Down, when I still did that, and his hermeneutic theories, paints the following picture. Man and man society consist in irrational conscious components. Charagma, according to Boltzmann, superstructure, according to Marx, ego, according to Freud. See, this is the thing that perennialists do, is they'll say X is the same as Y without even bothering to prove it. But charagma is not superstructure.
Yeah, this really could be a let's say I want to agree with it. I want to give it some the benefit of the doubt. I would say a paragraph to explain this.
Right.
Would help a lot.
And the unconscious, properly the structures in the structuralist meaning, basis will the power of Nietzsche, the unconscious, and Freud. I added the Freud because it's a parallel with aesthetics. And although externally it seems that the path of man leads directly to the captivity of the unconscious to the kingdom of reason, and that this exactly represents progress in the content of history. In fact, under the closest scrutiny, it becomes clear that the unconscious myth, again, X equals Y. Dugin does this. This is sneaky. I think you're willing to say he should do it in a paragraph. I'm thinking he's doing it as a rhetorical tactic. Proves much stronger,
you might be right.
As therefore considerably like what if you're going to talk about unconsciousness and relation and myth as relation to Marxism, why are you not mentioning Sorel? Except that that's going to hurt you when you're arguing that you're not like super fond of fascist.
What's funny there though is that like he's more than happy to entertain other proto-fascist thinkers.
Yeah. Oh, he entertains fascist thinkers and then pretends that they're not fascist, like Schmitt. Like, there's no way you can say Schmitt is a conservative revolutionary. He was a fascist.
Yeah.
Like just straight up. He was a fascist jurist. He was a member of the Nazi Party. Which is not something you could say for Junger or any of the other revolutionary conservatives in Germany.
And so what he does in this book is he does talk about transcending, taking the best from all the different intellectual paradigms, the different political theories. Mm-hmm. So it seems as though within the context of saying that, you could then also say, yes, this person was a fascist and that's not very good, but this thought is good.
It is still technically illegal to be a fascist in Russia, though. So,
I guess that's
probably why.
Yeah, okay, that's true.
And remember, we've also pointed out that his definition of fascism is weirdly the liberal one, which is to take the Nazis' racism as a paradigmatic thing of fascism, which other conservative thinkers like Paul Gottfried points out that's actually not his. Like, the Nazis are the weird ones, actually.
Yeah, they're almost unique. Well, I don't think it's almost unique. Yeah,
they're almost unique. I mean, they were the fact that it was so genetic and so biological. Their notion, like Spengler and Evola and Mussolini, have concepts of race, but their concepts of race are not nearly as biological.
Right.
They're metaphors to biology, but they're not like Spengler believes that someone who comes from two Jewish parents could be a good German and not part of the Jewish civilization.
Right.
Like,
I mean, that's right. That's why this conception of civilization is so important here as well. It's like,
right.
That's how it's being used.
But you need to insist on the Nazi definition of fascism as a biological racialist one, as opposed to this civilizationalist one, if you're gonna say you're not a fascist but something else. I mean, I really do think that's part of what's going on here. That's sneaky.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I meant this sincerely, but I've actually called him like the oddly early fascist, sympathetic, anti-fascist, post-fascist.
I only like their early stuff and their really late stuff. The middle period
Yeah.
when they're really famous, that's not very good.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
like it when they were a garage band, and then in their older
yeah.
their later.
We like Heidegger from Being in Time, and we're going to not talk about anything until late Heidegger after 1947 for no particular reason whatsoever.
Yes, when he was just on vacation.
Right. Which, to be fair to Dugin, so did liberal academia for ever. Like,
well, I was going to say that. I mean, that's kind of like us with. I mean, us, whatever the West with like Ford and Coca-Cola and a whole bunch of things. So it's
yeah.
this is not unique.
Our space program, missiles.
Yes. Right.